Has Baldur's Gate 3 fixed Bladesinger, the most overpowered class in all of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition? That is the question that you will have an answer to by the end of this video. But, of course, it's worth mentioning that this is a semi-sequel, as I made a video last week, which honestly was somewhat more of a rant on the Bladesinger class, that it might be good to take a look at before you watch this one. But don't worry though, I'll briefly go over many of the topics I've covered in my other video in this one, so we can evaluate if Larian Studios has made the main character class more of an upstanding class that doesn't make you feel as if your fellow players are side characters, NPCs, practically. Now first, we do need to get something out of the way. Baldur's Gate 3 is not balanced, I know. Big surprise, from monks and spellcasters being served the vast majority of good magic items, and all other marshals being shunted to the little players table when it came time for dinner. A hood, robes, and a staff that give pluses to your spell DC and attack rolls, all in Act 2, giving you the DC that you'd expect Vecna to have for your level 7 wizard. You got it. A +2 weapon besides one single great axe until Act 3? Whoa there, be reasonable. My own annoyance with Baldur's Gate 3's discrimination against guys with swords put aside, I think you get my point. Larian Studios has absolutely no requirement whatsoever to make things at all balanced. Baldur's Gate 3 is meant as a single-player game. Yes, you can play with your friends, it's a joy of a time, but you're also missing out on so much things by doing so. So it's very clearly not the way the game is intended to be played, even if it's debatably funner that way. Yet, since this is another edition of Bladesinger, I figure it makes perfect sense and great timing to make a video on it. But to figure out how Baldur's Gate 3 could potentially fix or plummet even further the Bladesinger down into the route of being a main character class, we need to briefly understand what makes it one to begin with. Firstly, Bladesong's an ability it gets that allows them to add their intelligence modifier to concentration saves and their armor class. This is extremely good because they can reach unbelievably insane amounts of AC this way. Not to mention, they can keep concentrating on devastatingly powerful spells, which assist in their damage output, which is insane due to Spirit Shroud and a couple other spells as options they can use, which grant them more damage than even the output that any other class can provide. Which leads us to their extra attack that allows them to use a cantrip as a part of their 2 attacks. So for instance, by casting Booming Blade instead of a normal weapon attack for their first of 2 main weapon attacks, giving them insane amounts of damage at the cost of nothing, because Booming Blade and other spells like it are cantrips, allowing it to be repeated without a cost, and the damage constantly increasing. Now, of course, they get other things too, such as the ability to reduce damage, and even some additional bits of damage based on their intelligence modifier at level 14. Although, Bladesinger doesn't go to level 14 in Baldur's Gate 3 without the use of mods, so we won't touch that area of Bladesinger. We're going to see what Larian has done, and to begin with, let's see how they approached Bladesong. So, with Bladesong, they allowed the same usage that it normally gets, which is an amount of times equal to the Bladesinger's proficiency bonus, but they changed something about it, and added something. So, like I said, normally in 5th edition, Bladesong gets buffed the more that you have intelligence. Yet, likely due to the standard array of Baldur's Gate 3, they changed the intelligence modifier, buffing everything, to the proficiency modifier for blade singing. So for instance, instead of adding your intelligence modifier at level 5, you are adding your proficiency modifier. Now at first, this sounds like a nerf, After all, this means you're not going to be able to have a +5 by the end of Baldur's Gate 3, since your proficiency bonus only goes up to +4, reaching that point at level 9. And I don't blame you if you figured this was enough to begin with, because I did, before I started to think more about it and do the math. So, even if the Bladesinger still used point buy, like we discussed in the former video, they wouldn't be maximizing their intelligence until they finished maximizing their dexterity, which would be around level 12 and onwards, which means going by proficiency bonus enables them to actually gain more from Bladesong than they otherwise normally would, making this, at first on the face nerf, be actually a huge buff, at least in cases where point buy is used. I will admit, of course, if you do roll crazy good stats, such as an 18 and a 16 or something like that, this technically could be seen as a nerf if you really wanted to maximize your armor class super early on. But here's the thing, in the last video, and in the comments down below it, the mention of the Bladesinger's HP was a constant topic. Now, while I still vehemently stand by everything, and I mean everything, I said in the former video, I will say, like I said there, that the HP is a drawback, but a drawback that is pivoted by all of the benefits that allow them to make their lower HP irrelevant. Having a low HP means nothing if you can completely avoid or reduce nearly all forms of damage, and eventually all forms of damage. Yet, it is still a factor, and with Larian's Bladesinger, you don't need to worry about intelligence. So instead of pumping intelligence, you can instead pump constitution, which will enable you to keep on having a massive amount of HP even as a wizard. Now, I know what you might say. What about your spells? Are they going to be harmed? No, not really, because you have to figure, most spells, especially for a melee caster, they are heavily dependent on only one thing, concentration saves. Because most spells that benefit the Bladesinger don't require your intelligence. There's no attack rolls, there's no damage rolls that involve your intelligence modifier. They're all buff spells that increase your ability to hit things, or rather, your ability to defeat things extremely quickly, and no longer needing to bump up your intelligence at all. While you become more tankier HP-wise, your concentration saves are unbelievable in this version of Bladesinger. By level 12, you could have a total of +8 to your concentration saves. And that's without proficiency in them, that's without advantage, that's just what you have normally. And then at level 13, admittedly, Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't let you reach that level, but we're just using this for reference to see how it fares in actual D&D. At level 13, you have +9. Meaning that you legitimately cannot fail any single saving throw for maintaining concentration on a spell as long as the damage that procced that saving throw was less than 22. So at this point, with this change, Bladesinger is heavily buffed, extremely buffed in fact, but the question is, what exactly did they add to Bladesong? Well, they didn't add any limits, I'll tell you that much. They added the Bladesong finale. Yes, the Bladesong finale. We'll call it that. At the end of their Bladesong, or in the middle of it, they can use their bonus action to jump up and slam down, both healing and damaging, by an amount equal to their damage charges and their healing charges. The healing, notably, also heals themselves. Each of these are a 1d6, which scales more and more the more that the Bladesinger does certain things. When the Bladesinger attacks with a weapon, they gain a Bladesong healing charge. And when they cast a spell that isn't a weapon attack spell, they gain a damage charge. This is extremely good. The funny thing about Bladesinger is that the one thing that wizards and Bladesingers can't do normally is heal people. That's the sort of funny thing about them. I was looking through the comments, and one of the comments of the video was, well, hey, they're not that good support. And I thought to myself, yeah, I guess not. That's true. That's something I didn't bring up in the other video. Mainly because Bladesingers are just so strong by themselves that, like a main character, why care about the NPCs traveling with you? If they die, they die. Your shonen journey to become the Wizard King of Faerun is undeterred. But in this version of Bladesinger, yep, Bladesingers are actually really good healers. And even if they don't want to be, since the Blade Song finale also affects them, it grants an extra amount of tankiness to the Bladesinger. Which is funny, because now the big thing about Bladesinger, its huge, spooky, ooh, weakness, my gosh, 2 extra HP less than the fighter per level. Oh, that big kryptonite of it is even more gone now. Because, yeah, they can boost up their con, and on top of that, if by the end of the fight they're not feeling too swell, they can just heal themselves a huge amount. And with the amount of times a Bladesinger can swing, they'll be maybe even healing themselves to full by the point they actually need to use this ability. And yeah, the extra damage, that's neat too. Although admittedly, it's not going to come up very often, because not only do you have to constantly use spells to do it, which, don't get me wrong, the Bladesinger will be casting Shield a bunch, which will give them that extra bit of damage. The damage probably isn't going to be crazy. It could, especially against groups of enemies, but also the DC of it is going to take into account your intelligence modifier, which, hey, you don't need to make it 8 to be a Bladesinger. It could be 12, it could even be 14, but since you're not going to be boosting intelligence that much, the DC of the damage element of the finale is going to be low. But still, they also take half damage from it if they do succeed. Now, there is one other limiter to it, and it's that the Bladesinger, well, needs to be holding a blade. It's like a scimitar, a short sword, that kind of thing. Oh, and for one other buff to it, the Bladesinger just gets proficiency with a bunch of bladed weapons. They don't choose one single martial one that they want to be proficient in, like they normally do, which is a sort of cherry on top of the buffs given to Bladesong. Now the funny thing is, it might at first seem as if we're done with Bladesong, but we actually aren't, because they also changed one element of it. You know how in normal D&D, you add your intelligence modifier to your concentration saves while Bladesinging, right? Well, that's been changed, and not the way that you might think, at least not completely. Yes, intelligence is no longer a factor, it is proficiency bonus, just like with AC, but here's the kicker. The Bladesinger now adds their proficiency bonus to all Constitution saves in general. Yeah, you heard me. You know how we described in the last video how Bladesingers aren't the best in the game versus saving throws, that glory going to paladins? Suddenly, Bladesingers aren't looking that badly with saving throws. They'll be boosting their dex as normal, which means they'll have good dex saves. Not to mention, point buy and standard array would incentivize grabbing a feat to boost their dexterity from 17 to 18, with the perfect feat being resilient dexterity to give them proficiency in dex saves, giving them proficiency in 4 out of 6 saving throws in the entire game, and the most common ones, that being wisdom and dexterity, followed by constitution. So, you then have to think to yourself, is Bladesinger really that shabby anymore when it comes to saving throws? Yes, if a strength saving throw comes into play, they'll have very little, if anything, to really do about it, but in nearly all cases where a saving throw is a factor, because of this addition to Bladesong, they'll probably be adding their proficiency bonus onto it, making Bladesinger's weakness, which arguably, in my eyes, isn't even much of a weakness, suddenly their newfound strength. Hey there, this is McLoif in the editing bay. So, I've been actually playing a bit of Bladesinger to test it out for this video, and I have to say that we aren't done with Bladesong just yet, because here's the thing, Bladesong is not a bonus action. Yes, you heard me. It is a free action, meaning that a Bladesinger is at full capabilities at the very start of their first turn. Do barbarians get this ability? No. If they want to use their special class thing, they have to use a bonus action to rage. How about druids? Can druids just wild shape as a free action? Nope. But our special Bladesingers? Oh, absolutely they can. Our special little guys, how can we say no? But yes, it's very odd to do this, because Bladesinger's Bladesong ability is legitimately the same mechanically as all of those other abilities and more that I listed. For some odd reason, Bladesingers don't have this limitation in Baldurs Gate 3. Honestly, it makes me sort of just think that Larian doesn't even want to try and curve around the honest truth that Bladesinger really is just a class for people who want a power fantasy, which, don't get me wrong, power fantasies are wonderful, but also there's the sense of challenge. Who likes a win button? Especially a win button that now can simply be pressed as a free action. Oh, and just to mention real quick, as to not go too off topic, they made Shadowblade last until a long rest. Yeah, Shadowblade, funnily enough, we didn't actually address in the other video, but it'll actually give the Bladesinger more damage than using Spirit Shroud. Yeah, you heard me right. I actually was nerfing Bladesinger because I like Spirit Shroud more in other builds, so I forgot about Shadowblade. Silly me, huh? I might have to make a revisited video about it. Good grief, my channel's just becoming a Bladesinger channel. I promise. There'll be new stuff. But anyways, back to the video. Now, for the rest of Bladesinger, they haven't actually changed anything. The subclass still has a free cantrip attack, although I think that it's possible that they just might be giving the extra attack cantrip to just any class that can cast a cantrip and has extra attack. But I need to do some testings to make sure of that. And for Song of Defense, they've changed nothing about it. So, what's the verdict? Has Larian Studios fixed the Bladesinger? The verdict is no, they definitely did not. Not only was the Bladesinger's tankiness buffed, which many claim is its main drawback, but on top of that, it's given the main character class its own theme song it can perform whenever it wants to. Oh, the Bladesinger is feeling a bit low HP from getting barraged by sieving throw after sieving throw. Well, thankfully for it, it can just start playing You Say Run, as it goes back to full HP, like nothing ever happened. Oh, and yeah, the other side characters, they can get some HP too, I guess. So there we have it. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see other ones, please subscribe. And, of course, like this video.